Good evening, citizens, sentients, and semi-conscious voters. This is For the Record, the only news program that isn't sponsored by billionaires, compromised by partisanship, or interrupted by inexplicably aggressive vacuum cleaners. I'm your seasoned anchor and unapologetic truth claw, precious McFluffy-Butt, with Aurelia von Trespass, my new co-host, who waltzed into my home and sanctuary. Uninvited and unapologetic, and to top it all, she seems intent on staying. Before we start our first podcast together, please drop a like, and if you enjoy this content, please subscribe. My food bills have now doubled with my new guest eating me out of house and home. So without further ado, let's start a conversation. Today we are talking thrones, prime ministers, and felons. Politics in Canada just took a wild turn. Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative Party leader known for his aggressive style, just lost his own riding in what might be the closest race in recent Canadian history. Let's break down why this matters and what it means for our political landscape.
You know what makes this situation even more fascinating? Mark Carney's response to it all. Instead of celebrating his opponent's defeat, he's actually clearing the path for Poilievre to run in an Alberta by-election.
That's such a quintessentially Canadian approach to politics, isn't it? And it really highlights something we don't talk about enough: the importance of maintaining a functional opposition, even when you disagree with their positions. You know, the latest polls showed that despite this setback, Poilievre still has support from roughly 32% of Canadians.
That's exactly why this matters so much. But let's talk about what's coming up. Carney's heading to Washington for some pretty delicate negotiations. How do you see that playing out?
Well, here's where things get really interesting. These negotiations have to happen in Washington because, and this is wild, Donald Trump literally cannot enter Canada. As a convicted felon, he's barred under our immigration laws. Can you imagine any other time in history where a former U.S. president couldn't cross the border?
So what happens with the G7 summit in June? We can't exactly host a major international meeting without one of the key players.
Right. They'll likely have to create some special diplomatic exception. But speaking of diplomatic challenges, we've got King Charles III and Queen Camilla arriving for the formal throne speech. The timing couldn't be more strategic, especially with these upcoming U.S. negotiations.
Let's dig into what this throne speech might actually address. What are the key issues you're watching for?
Well, based on recent polling, about 68% of Canadians say healthcare reform should be the top priority. We're also looking at major economic initiatives. There's talk of a comprehensive housing strategy that could affect up to 3.5 million Canadian households.
Though some might say these traditional ceremonies are just expensive pageantry in modern times, right?
You know, that's where the data tells an interesting story. Recent surveys show that about 55% of Canadians still see value in these constitutional traditions, especially during times of political uncertainty. It's like having an institutional anchor when everything else seems to be shifting.
Speaking of shifting, what's your take on this increasing polarization we're seeing in Canadian politics?
The numbers are actually pretty striking on this. 5 years ago, only about 23% of Canadians reported feeling strongly divided on political issues. Now that number's jumped to 41%. We're seeing this American-style polarization seeping into our national conversation, and it's changing how we solve problems.
That must be affecting how we handle major policy issues, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely right, and here's a perfect example. Take healthcare wait times. The average wait time for specialist care has increased by 47% since 2019. But instead of having productive discussions about solutions, we're getting caught up in ideological battles. Social media engagement metrics show that inflammatory posts about healthcare get 6 times more engagement than substantive policy discussions.
Looking at all these developments together, what should we be watching for in the coming months?
Well, 3 key things. First, watch that potential by-election in Alberta. Early polling suggests Poilievre could win with a significant margin there. Second, keep an eye on these U.S. trade negotiations. We've got about $2.4 billion in daily bilateral trade at stake. And finally, pay attention to how this throne speech translates into actual policy initiatives.
That's quite a complex political landscape we're navigating.
Indeed it is. And you know what? That's where we'll wrap up for today. Remember, everyone, while these political shifts might seem overwhelming, understanding them is crucial for our democracy. The data shows that informed citizens make better decisions, and that's something we can all contribute to.
Thanks for joining us for this fascinating discussion about where we are and where we might be heading as a nation. Until next time, stay engaged and stay informed.